For decades, Americans were told that the government had found nothing extraordinary in the sky. Then the files opened. Inside were reports of objects outrunning aircraft, glowing formations over Washington, radar operators tracking impossible targets, and military witnesses describing machines they could not identify. Some pages were stamped secret. Others had entire paragraphs removed. It looked like confirmation of the oldest suspicion in UFO history. Someone knew more than they admitted. But buried inside those records is a different secret. The government was hiding something. The question is whether it was hiding visitors from another world, or something much closer to home. The modern American UFO story is usually said to begin in June 1947. Pilot Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 bright objects moving near Mount Rainier. Newspapers transformed his description into a new phrase, flying saucers. Within weeks, the country was seeing them everywhere. Then came Roswell. On July 8, 1947, the Roswell Army Airfield announced that it had recovered a flying disc. The statement was quickly replaced by a simpler explanation: weather balloon debris. That reversal became the foundation of the cover-up story. One announcement said disc, the next said balloon. Decades later, witnesses would speak of alien bodies and strange materials, but the earliest government records contain no verified extraterrestrial craft. What they reveal instead is a military establishment entering the Cold War with a terrifying new problem. Something was appearing in American airspace, and officials could not always tell whether it was imaginary, natural, or Soviet. In 1947, the United States had reason to be nervous. The Second World War had ended, but the nuclear age had begun. Soviet intelligence was active. Long-range bombers could cross borders. Rockets captured from Nazi Germany had demonstrated that weapons could arrive from extreme altitude with almost no warning. A mysterious object was not merely a scientific curiosity. It could be a surveillance platform, an experimental aircraft, or evidence that another nation had achieved a technological breakthrough. The Air Force created Project Sign in 1948 to examine the reports. Sign was followed by Project Grudge and, in 1952, Project Blue Book. The names changed, but the central challenge remained. Officials had to separate balloons, stars, aircraft, atmospheric effects, and hoaxes from anything that might pose a genuine threat. Most reports eventually received ordinary explanations. Some did not. And those unidentified cases ensured that the files could never close the mystery completely. But then the sky over the most politically sensitive city in America appeared to erupt. On the night of July 19, 1952, radar controllers at Washington National Airport detected several unidentified targets. The returns did not behave like ordinary scheduled traffic. Controllers reported that some appeared to move slowly before accelerating. Other targets appeared near the White House and the Capitol. Pilots were asked to look. Some saw lights. Interceptor aircraft were sent into the area, but the targets seemed to disappear. When the jets left, the returns reportedly came back. 1 week later, it happened again. Newspapers printed dramatic headlines. Photographs of lights above Washington circulated nationwide, although the most famous image was a time exposure of streetlights, not proof of objects hovering over the Capitol. The Air Force held its largest press conference since the Second World War. Major General John Samford argued that unusual temperature conditions could have caused radar reflections. That explanation was plausible. It was not universally convincing. Radar operators believed they knew what weather interference looked like. Some visual observations appeared to correspond with radar returns. And the speed with which officials tried to calm the story made the public more suspicious. But behind the official explanation, the CIA had developed another concern. Not that the objects were alien, that the reports themselves could become a weapon. In January 1953, the CIA convened a panel of scientists chaired by physicist H.P. Robertson. The panel reviewed photographs, films, and selected UFO cases. Its members did not find evidence that the reported objects were extraterrestrial spacecraft. Yet their conclusions were not simply, "nothing to see here." The panel warned that mass interest in UFOs could overload military communication channels. During a real attack, a flood of false reports might make it harder to identify genuine enemy aircraft. Officials were also concerned that an adversary could deliberately exploit public UFO anxiety. The recommended response went beyond investigating individual sightings. The panel discussed reducing public interest through education and debunking. It also suggested monitoring civilian UFO organizations because of their potential influence on public thinking. That language matters. It does not prove that scientists found aliens and concealed them, but it shows that the government was thinking about UFO belief as something that had to be managed. From that moment, two investigations were happening at once. One asked what witnesses had seen. The other asked what public belief might do. And then American intelligence began flying machines that officials could never publicly acknowledge. In the mid-1950s, the CIA began testing the U-2 reconnaissance aircraft. Commercial airliners of the period generally flew far below it. The U-2 could operate above 60,000 feet, at altitudes where an aircraft might catch the last sunlight, while the ground below had already entered darkness. To an airline pilot or observer, the result could look unnatural, a brilliant, fast-moving point suspended in a darkening sky. Later came Oxcart and the A-12, a high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft capable of extraordinary speed. These projects were deeply classified. Officials investigating unusual sightings could not simply announce that a witness had probably seen a secret American spy plane, ACIA. Historical study later stated that U-2 and Oxcart flights accounted for more than half of UFO reports during parts of the late 1950s and 1960s. The exact scope of that estimate has been debated, but the central problem is undeniable. Some UFO witnesses were telling the truth. They really had seen a machine the government denied existed. Investigators sometimes gave explanations they knew were incomplete, because revealing the actual aircraft could expose a major intelligence program. The secrecy protected national security. It also taught the public a lasting lesson. When officials dismiss a strange object, their explanation may not be the whole story. One of the FBI's most famous UFO documents is a 1950 memo associated with Guy Hoddle, head of the Bureau's Washington field office. The memo relayed information from an unnamed source claiming that 3 flying saucers had been recovered in New Mexico. According to the story, each contained 3 human-shaped bodies about 3 feet tall. The language was extraordinary. When the FBI placed the document online decades later, it spread as evidence that the government had admitted recovering alien bodies. But the document was not an FBI confirmation. It was a record of a second-hand claim. The Bureau did not verify it, and the FBI later connected the story to a widely publicized hoax involving Silas Newton and Leo Gebauer. The memo demonstrates the danger of reading government files without understanding why those files exist. An agency can record a claim without endorsing it. A secret stamp can describe how a document was handled, not whether its contents were true. A blacked-out name may protect a source, not an alien program. The existence of a file proves that someone reported something. It does not prove that the reported event happened. But that still leaves hundreds of cases that were never identified. Between 1947 and 1969, Project Blue Book collected 12,618 UFO reports. The Air Force classified 701 as unidentified. That number is often presented as a buried admission. 701 objects that defeated every conventional explanation. Unidentified is not the same as inexplicable. Sometimes the observation was too brief. Sometimes the location, time, or direction was uncertain. Photographs lacked reference points. Radar data were incomplete. Investigators arrived too late. Witness accounts contradicted one another. Insufficient information can prevent an identification even when the underlying cause is ordinary. At the same time, dismissing all 701 cases would go beyond the evidence. Some came from trained observers. Some included multiple witnesses or instruments. A small number remained genuinely difficult to reconstruct. Project Blue Book concluded that it had found no evidence of extraterrestrial vehicles, technology beyond known science, or a threat to national security. It closed in 1969. But the files left behind an unresolved contradiction. The Air Force said there was no proof of extraordinary machines. Its own archive still contained cases it could not explain. That space between unidentified and alien became the territory where the modern UFO mythology grew. Decades later, UFOs returned under a new name, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, or UAP. New government offices collected reports. Military videos were released. Congress held hearings. The subject was once again treated as a legitimate aviation and intelligence issue. Yet, official investigations have still not produced publicly verified evidence of extraterrestrial technology. That does not make every witness mistaken. It means the archive contains several different mysteries disguised as one. Some sightings were planets, balloons, aircraft, radar effects, or illusions. Some were hoaxes and rumors preserved because officials had to record them. Some remain unresolved because the available data are too poor. And some were connected to technology so secret that the government preferred an enduring UFO mystery to an accurate explanation. The files were never a single hidden history of contact. They were a collision between human perception, military secrecy, and fear of an enemy in the sky. Return to those blacked-out pages. For years, redactions were treated as silhouettes of alien truth, the missing words that would finally reveal what the government knew. But the strongest documented secret inside the UFO archive was often not the object. It was the observer's proximity to a classified capability. The government did conceal information. It sometimes allowed weak explanations to stand. It studied how public belief might be influenced, controlled, or exploited. And it protected secret aircraft, even when doing so deepened suspicion. That behavior did not require recovered spacecraft, but it created the perfect conditions for people to believe in them. The public discovered real secrecy, attached it to an unresolved phenomenon, and assumed the hidden part must be more extraordinary than the visible one. Sometimes it may have been. The surviving records do not allow us to say that. What they do show is how a cover-up can exist without covering up the thing everyone expects. The UFO files. America was never supposed to see. Do not end the argument over what is in the sky. They explain why the argument became impossible to end. Because once a government hides real machines behind false skies, every future denial inherits the shadow of that deception. And perhaps that is the most unsettling discovery in the archive. The files do not prove that something came to America from another world. They prove that America made part of its own world look alien.